Today's video, I want to walk you through something that has completely reshaped my home lab in 2026, and it shows the direction that my home lab is headed. I built a 5-node Proxmox and Ceph home lab with 17 terabytes of all-NVMe storage, dual 10 gig LACP networking, and this build represents a full migration away from VMware for my production workloads. Over the past few weeks, I've been in a deep dive into the weeds with Ceph, Proxmox networking, NVMe OSD layouts, erasure coding, jumbo frames, LACP, and even some self-inflicted mistakes just because I like to live dangerously and I don't have anything else to do. So in this video, I'm going to give the full walkthrough of what I built, why I built it this way, what I learned, and the mistakes along the way. So stick around and let's dive right in. Well, over the last few years, my home lab has gone through several evolutions. Historically, I have ran full-size 19-inch racks, enterprise gear, although I had started that migration to mini PCs, and I also have historically ran VMware vSphere for my production home lab services. But in 2026, I intentionally decided to shrink the physical footprint of the lab without shrinking what that lab was capable of doing. I moved completely away from what I would consider full-depth rack dependencies, and I collapsed everything down into a mini rack. The hardware I chose for this refresh is 5 Minisforum MS01 mini PCs mounted in my TechMojo 12U mini rack. This transition was driven by power consumption, space constraints, noise, and also my desire to get completely away from VMware and Broadcom licensing changes, and Proxmox has become my default hypervisor of choice. It is open source, it's powerful, and it integrates natively with Ceph HCI storage. And HCI was something that I was itching to get my feet back wet into. I've always liked the idea of hyper-converged infrastructure in the home lab. When I first started using vSAN from VMware in the VMware lab a few years ago, I really enjoyed the simplicity of having distributed storage across nodes, not having to depend on an external storage device. But with the changes in VMware licensing, vSAN no longer made any sense for me. However, Ceph HCI storage gives us a true enterprise-ready distributed storage platform that can scale massively, and it integrates directly into Proxmox. So I felt like it was the right time at the right place for me in my home lab journey to get back into HCI via Ceph. Originally, I'd experimented with Ceph on dissimilar hardware. I even use it today in the form of microceph in my Docker Swarm environment and also a Kubernetes environment that I've played around with. But I've always wanted to build a proper erasure-coded Ceph cluster. To do erasure coding properly, I decided to go with 5 nodes. My first iteration of that worked really surprisingly well. I had dissimilar hardware, lots of different mini PCs, or 5 mini PCs with 2.5 gig networking. But I knew HCI was bound by networking, so I wanted to get to 10 gig once again. What I decided to do was retrofit the cluster with 5 identical Minisforum MS01 systems. I already own 2 of those from my previous VMware ESXi cluster, so what I decided to do was purchase 3 more bare bones units, and so I was able to reuse, thankfully, the memory that I had already in the other mini PCs, as well as the storage. So the result is a uniform Proxmox cluster running Ceph with dual 10 gig SFP plus networking per node. So that allowed me to do some really cool things and unleash the power of HCI. Uniform hardware in HCI, I think, makes a huge difference. Ceph is very forgiving, but hyper-converged infrastructure in general performs best when all nodes have the same CPU characteristics, same networking capabilities, same storage layout. That just makes sense. And whether you're running HCI or not, if you're running a virtualization stack, that is what most vendors recommend. So I decided to standardize on the MS01s. I have a lot of pavement behind me with those. I really like those little units. They've served me well. So let's talk about the storage layout. Each MS01 has 3 NVMe slots. The slot closest to the U.2 switch, if you are familiar with that, is the PCIe 4.0 X4 slot. So that's where I put my 2 terabyte Samsung 980 Pros in each of those units. That was like my primary OSD. The second slot is a PCIe 3.0 X4 slot. So I installed a variety of NVMe drives in that second slot. I had mostly 1 terabyte drives, but I did have a couple of 2 terabyte drives. Even though I deviated from being uniform slightly there, I wanted the disk space. So I wanted to take advantage of the NVMe drives that I currently had. Then I used the NVMe slot or M.2 slot that was furthest from the U.2 switch. That is where I actually run the NVMe drive that Proxmox boots from. Now, the migration from dissimilar mini PCs to 5 MS01 systems was done very carefully and one node at a time. In most cases, what I found that I literally was able to do was just simply pull the NVMe drive out of the old mini PC, install that in the MS01 units, and Proxmox booted up like it didn't know any difference. And it adapted to the new hardware. It's one of the beauties of Linux. The only required change for me was updating the network configuration because the nicknames did change in those identifiers. So I just simply edited the file located at etc network interfaces, which if you run Proxmox, you're familiar with. I updated the interface names for the new adapters, rebuilt those, did an IF reload -A, and everything just came up like nothing had happened. However, I did take a step into getting to a bonded configuration. So now each node uses a bond configured in 802.3 AD mode, which is LACP, and I've got layer 2+3 hashing enabled. I enabled jumbo frames with MTU 9000 on the physical NICs, the bond, and all the bridges. My primary bridge, VMBR0, is VLAN aware and carries VLANs 2 through 4094, so it's basically set up as a trunk. And I also created dedicated VLANs for various virtual machine backed VLANs that I have virtual machines connected to. I also created new VLANs to separate not only Ceph traffic, but also storage traffic and also migration traffic. And I made sure that those were properly separated. I had jumbo frames enabled, and all of that was carved out without any issues. One of my nodes required a different migration path that I blogged about just a few days ago because I had it booting from a SATA SSD. What I decided to do was a little bit out there, but for that particular system, what I did was just booted from Hiren's boot CD, which many are familiar with, and it has Macrium Reflect imaging software. And so I just created an image of the SATA SSD and I restored that image to an NVMe M.2 drive. And this, as the blog post noted, was incredibly easy. I was surprised I didn't have any issues with that. Now, Ceph was where most of the real learning for me happened. I'd never done an erasure coded storage pool before, so I configured erasure coding using the 3+2 scheme. So in Ceph terms, that means the K value equals 3 and M equals 2. So data is split into 3 data chunks, and then you have 2 parity chunks for a total of 5 chunks distributed across the cluster. Now, this allows me to tolerate 2 simultaneous host failures or OSD failures. So the beauty of that with erasure coding is storage efficiency is around 66%, which is dramatically better if you've done the triple replication. That with Ceph effectively gives you 33% usable capacity. So in practical terms, I needed at least 3 of the 5 chunks available to read or write data so that I can lose any 2 nodes or any 2 OSDs without losing access to my data. I also configured placement groups to auto grow as storage expands. So during the process, I made a mistake. Also, one of those shooting myself in the foot moments. Tired one night, I was trying to make headway, but I accidentally wiped the wrong NVMe drive while looking at an LSBLK output. That was a painful moment. However, Ceph did exactly what it was designed to do. I removed the wiped OSD from the cluster configuration. I re-added it properly, and then I let Ceph rebalance and heal itself. So that was the beauty of having the erasure coded Ceph pool. The lesson here is simple. Always double and triple check any device identifiers before zapping and wiping those drives. Now, networking took more time than anything else, and this is where I really kind of banged my head against the wall a couple of days. My upgrade path was fairly methodical for networking. First, I replaced all the MS01 systems, brought those into the cluster so that every node had the dual SFP plus ports. Then I installed a 10 gig top of rack switch in the mini rack. I migrated from the built-in 2.5 gig ports that I was using before to a single 10 gig SFP link per node. And that was my plan. I wanted to step into it. So I went from 2.5 gig to just a single 10 gig. And then my plan was to step my way into the bonded LACP configurations, which I was able to do. The first issue that I ran into was jumbo frames. I had missed setting MTU 9000 on a couple of nodes, and this led to extremely strange behavior where small packets worked, but large bursts of packets failed. So things like ARP, ICMP, SSH, web UIs, they worked fine, but Ceph IO would stall, VM migrations would fail, weird backup issues were showing up. So jumbo frames, it's a beautiful thing when you have everything configured correctly, but it requires absolute consistency from the VM, VirtIO bridge, VLAN, NIC, switch, and everything in between. So if you've got one hop that is at 1500 still, jumbo frames get dropped and you'll see inconsistent behavior. So that's what happened to me. So I finally stumbled on that, found it, and everything was good from that standpoint. The second major issue involved Linux bridges, VLAN tagging, and Proxmox firewall flags. Now this was totally new to me. When you configure a VM NIC with a bridge set to VMBR0, assign a VLAN tag, and enable the firewall, Proxmox dynamically creates additional VLAN subinterfaces and firewall bridges at runtime. Now, these are not visible in your etc network interfaces file. That's what kept getting me. They're generated to allow per VM firewall filtering. So under a single physical NIC, this works really without any notice of anything going wrong. However, once I introduced LACP, I started having some really weird issues, and it related to those dynamically created subinterfaces that existed both on the bond that I had set up and its slaves. That effectively created two plumbing paths, if you will, to certain VLANs that I had configured, and the result was very inconsistent connectivity, strange ping behavior. It looked like LACP was broken on a couple of hosts, but in reality, it was the interaction between VLAN tagging and firewall-enabled virtual machines. So once I cleaned that configuration up, I got rid of the underlying VLAN sub interfaces and everything cleaned up. It was amazing how the pings just automatically went to 100% with zero packet loss after I cleaned those things out of there. So do note that if you have that particular combination, firewall enabled, you're tagging VLANs from the network interface directly on the virtual machine, and that is connected to your default VMBR0 bridge, it's going to create those underlying subinterfaces for that VLAN, so that if in your interfaces file you then combine with LACP, set those bridges up like you wanted there, those underlying bridges are still in existence, and you're going to have all kinds of funky behavior. And that's what I saw. After I cleaned that up, everything worked as expected. Now, on top of Ceph block storage, I'm also running CephFS. Now, CephFS provides a distributed file system backed by Ceph. I use CephFS for shared storage across my environment, and I really think CephFS is super cool. It allows you basically to have a file system with all the underlying benefits of Ceph underneath, and this is what I actually use for my Talos Linux Kubernetes cluster, and more on that, but it gives me resilient shared file storage that can be accessed from multiple nodes and managed with standard file tools. So you can see all of the data and interact with it with any of your favorite tools that you want to interact with it, copying files, so on and so forth. So for Kubernetes, I mentioned I'm running Talos Linux as virtual machines stored on Ceph RBD volumes. For persistent storage, though, inside of Kubernetes, I'm using that CephFS volume as a storage provider where the persistent data gets housed. Now, some have asked me this: why do you run Omni, which is their orchestrator for Talos Linux, and run this in virtual machines instead of running Talos Linux on bare metal? Well, for me, it allows to have the best of both worlds. I can have all of my Talos Linux nodes up and running, even if I have to perform maintenance on that physical host. I just migrate those VMs, and I tell you, when I went through and had to replace nodes and all of those things, I was thanking myself that I had my Talos environment configured as I did. Now, why 5 nodes instead of 3? Well, 3 would have been the bare minimum for a cluster, but again, that was not enough for erasure coding. With 5 nodes, I can lose 2 nodes. I can still maintain Quorum and Proxmox, and I can maintain Ceph availability under that 3+2 erasure coding scheme, as I mentioned earlier. Maintenance is less stressful because taking a single node offline doesn't push you to that limit of, hey, if anything else happens, you're toast. But instead, you still got the fail-safe of even another failure outside of that single host. The total usable storage for me in this mini cluster comes in around 17 terabytes for all NVMe distributed storage across 5 mini PCs and a compact mini rack. I think that's pretty awesome. This cluster supports live VM migrations for me, Kubernetes workloads, distributed storage, node failures, fault tolerance, and a footprint that is really quiet, efficient, and it's far smaller than traditional enterprise gear. I am really genuinely excited about 2026 and continuing to work with this platform. I'm excited to get headfirst 100% into Proxmox with Ceph, CephFS combined with Talos Kubernetes. And I think this is going to give a really flexible, powerful, and open source foundation for everything that I want to experiment with in 2026. And it's physically smaller, but actually more capable in an architectural way than many of my previous full-size rack builds. And we all know this. It's not the size of the rack. It's how you design the build. It's how you architect the services. What would you do differently with this setup? Would you change anything that I have described here? The erasure coding profile, the networking layout, hardware choices? Drop your feedback in the comments. I'm really interested in what you think about this build. If you enjoyed this deep dive and nerding out into my 5-node Proxmox and Ceph cluster for the 2026 Home Lab, make sure to like and subscribe. Do stay safe out there. Keep those lab clusters up and running, and I will see you in the next video.